observer. Have you ever had the feeling that you are being watched in your sleep? An alarming feeling that someone is nearby and is watching intently. I think almost everyone has experienced this, but when you open your eyes, you sigh with relief because you see only the environment that is familiar to you without strangers who could disturb your sleep. But one day, having seen him, I understood why we wake up in the middle of the night for practically no reason, and what made me tremble with incredible fear. This happened in the summer. At that time, it was hot even at night, and I am a person who cannot stand heat, so the windows were wide open both day and night. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning. I was sleeping soundly, but still someone or something managed to interrupt my sleep. I heard a noise, as if someone was scratching or climbing, but still I did not pay attention to it, since the window was open and the sounds could be coming from the street, and I fell asleep again. But after a short period of time, I felt eyes on me. A chilling look. The same feeling I talked about at the very beginning. Thinking that I had imagined it, but nevertheless deciding to make sure that there were no strangers in the room, I opened my eyes. A mask of horror froze on my face. A creature of unknown origin sat on the windowsill, fixing a fierce gaze on me. A terrible sight was presented to my eyes. Just the sight of him inspired incredible fear. A humanoid creature with an emaciated body, bones covered with gray, wrinkled skin. Thin hands looked like rakes, and the face was even more terrible. The eyes were black as darkness, without whites or irises. The nose consisted of 2 holes. A mouth that probably had 2 rows of sharp teeth with which he could easily tear me apart, and from behind you could see how the spine was sticking out. I couldn't believe what I was seeing now. I so wanted this to be a nightmare, but alas, it was not. Terror gripped me. I was ready to cry out of despair, because I understood that I could not escape from him. My imagination painted terrible pictures, imagining his further actions, making me tremble. About 5 minutes passed. Although it seemed like an eternity, the time dragged on painfully long. I still looked at this creature without taking my eyes off, and it looked at me as if preparing to attack me and tear my flesh with its limbs. But at the same time, it seemed like we were playing a staring contest. I already thought it was a fun game, but tears of despair and horror still flowed down my cheeks. A terrible cold chilled me. And then, there was what I feared most. The creature with strange movements climbed down from the windowsill and began to come closer to me. Moving absurdly, it stopped 2 steps away from me, also looking at me, already with a gloomy look. I had nothing left to do but wait for my end. But suddenly, some noise was heard on the street, and during all this time the creature looked away, looking at the window. After a minute, it tried to say something. It didn't sound like the way we usually talk. His voice was low and hoarse. It spoke drawlingly and as if on a breath. But what was even creepier was that the creature was whispering my name. But then the following happened, something I least expected. It again pierced me with its ominous gaze and the same strange movements. It went to the window, climbed onto the windowsill again, and it jumped down. And it seemed to dawn on me, crying. I ran to close all the windows in the house. I cried both from the experience and from happiness. It's gone, damn it. I'm alive. I simply fell to my knees from exhaustion. And by chance I turned to the window. At the same moment I pulled away from the window, backing towards the wall. A creature already familiar to me appeared in it. It opened its mouth as if in a silent scream, and sharp teeth appeared to my eyes, just as I had imagined earlier. And it began to run its limbs along the glass, after which scratches remained, and then it began to furiously beat on the window, trying to break it. I rushed to the pantry, locked myself there. I heard his prolonged howl. This continued until the morning. A terrible grinding sound at the window and an inhuman howl, and I soon fell into a deep sleep from powerlessness. I woke up when the clock showed 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and coming closer to the door, I began to listen. Except for silence, I heard nothing. After a couple of minutes, I finally dared to leave my shelter, although it took me a lot of effort to do so. With hands trembling with fear, I slowly turned the door handle, but I increasingly wanted to lock myself in the closet again and squeeze into the corner like a little kitten. But I had to open the doors and go outside. It was empty. Looking warily at the window, I saw a large crack running through the window, and I just started laughing hysterically. It all looked crazy to me. although be that as it may, it was all in reality. From that moment, enough time would have passed for everything to calm down, but that was not the case. It still returns to me every night, flashing through the window and looking at me with the same piercing gaze. Sooner or later, it will still get to me and do what it wanted to do on that terrible night. From the city to the dacha to escape the heat, but this did not help much. Everyone was waiting for the rain, and it finally came. At night, a severe thunderstorm began. The wind was raging, the thunder was deafening, and suddenly there was a sharp bang in the yard, as if a huge balloon had burst, and a crash. We looked out the window. It was an old dried apple tree in the yard blazing. Despite the rain, the husband ran out to put out the fire, but he returned very quickly without completing the extinguishing, all wet, but shivering, as it later turned out, not at all from the cold. He saw something, but could not describe what exactly. He wasn't even sure if it was a person. Something very tall, over 2 meters tall, walked near our barn and saw my husband and headed towards him. Then he couldn't stand it and rushed home as fast as he could. Having calmed down a little, we decided that it was all his imagination. It's dark outside, and it could just be a shadow. That same night, closer to 3 o'clock, I still couldn't sleep. Bad weather was raging outside. You couldn't really sleep, so I decided to go to the kitchen to drink tea. In the kitchen window, I noticed a strange shadow moving chaotically around the yard, not smoothly, but abruptly jumping from the center of the garden to the barn and beyond. Without hesitation, I opened the window. The wind had already died down, but it was still pouring heavily, and visibility was minimal. I started to look closer, but there was no shadow anywhere, and having calmed down, I was about to close the window when I noticed 2 bright lights on the garage. Peering into the darkness, I noticed movement behind the lights, like a cat getting ready to jump on its prey. Screaming, I closed the window and ran to my husband. He and I checked the locks on the doors again and sat in our arms all night, not sleeping a wink. In the morning, the consequences of the storm were obvious: fallen trees, a collapsed roof of the neighbor's barn. But there was one more thing that we could not explain. Then our straw garden furniture was torn to shreds. Without hesitation, we packed up and went home to the city. I don't know what it was, but neither my husband nor I had any desire to experience something like this again. Everything was fine, and we forgot that story like a bad dream. Until yesterday. In the morning when I was leaving for work, my husband shouted to me from the bedroom, "Darling, did you hear what a terrible thunderstorm there was at night?" "No, dear," I answered, trying to hide the trembling in my voice. Let him see it a little later, in God. Let him decide that it was a stray dog who left those terrible scratches on the front door.